Hello everyone, this is Keith from the Solo Gamers Club and welcome to my channel. Tonight I'm going to preview the changes that I've made to my War of the Rings solitaire system, a rule set that I call Alone in Middle-earth. If you're unfamiliar with this, it's a system of rules and tables that allow a player to control the forces of the Free Peoples, while the shadow player is directed by an AI of sorts known as the Shadowbot. This system is designed to maintain the original flow of the game to the greatest possible extent, while still providing a somewhat cunning and unpredictable artificial opponent to play against. In this video, I'll outline the changes that I've made since my last series, and I'll preview a few player aids that I've created. I'll begin with the changes that I've made to my Alone in Middle-earth. This is going to be version 3.3. More than likely, this is going to be the final version. I'm going to be posting this eventually on BGG, so in case anyone wants to use this, we'll have it available to you. And I'll go through the changes first. First modification is for the hunt allocation table. What I've done here is we've kept the table the same, but I've changed some of the modifiers to account for inboard actions that might be occurring, which would raise or lower the probability of the shadow player placing more or less dice in the hunt box. So what we've done is I've increased the Fellowship is Revealed modifier up to +2. And that's going to give a little bit more action in placing more dice when the Fellowship is revealed. And many times there are event cards that will target the Fellowship if they're revealed, so that is the purpose of that. Table B is Sauron's Gaze table. Now, with this table, we determine whether Sauron is going to pursue military matters or his hunt for the ring. I've increased the probabilities a little bit on the military matters side of the roll, and we've compensated for this with modifiers. I've increased the modifier to +2 for the Fellowship is Revealed, and also +2 for the Fellowship on the Mordor track. That will give more probability to the shadow player hunting for the ring later in the game, and he'll pursue more military matters earlier in the game. Table C is the military table, and this determines the focus of Sauron. We haven't made many changes to this at all. In fact, I don't think I made any. This is a D20 roll, and then that determines where Sauron's focus is going to be centered for the turn. If this is a military matter, he would focus his attention on Angmar or Rhûn, Dol Guldur or Moria, Isengard, Umbar or Harad, and Mordor. Each focus location has a primary and at least one secondary objective. When a focus location, for example, say Mordor, is selected, first choice is Osgiliath. That is going to be his primary focus. Once Osgiliath is captured, we would move on to the secondary objectives of Minas Tirith, Dal Amroth, or Edoras. Now, if a player enjoys more regimented control of the shadow player, I've created a Table D military priority chart. And those list from between A to I, and we would go through when a military action is authorized, we would go through these steps, and that will tell us what the shadow player is going to do. Starting with A, if we can fulfill that completely, great, we do it. If not, we move down to B, C, D, etc. And finally, we have Table E that's similar to Table D, but this is for the hunt for the ring priorities. And the same actions would take place. If this is a Sauron's Gaze is to the ring, we would start with A and attempt to fulfill that action. If not, we would go down to B, C, D, and E. I've made some modifications to this in, I think I added in D, or play event die to draw a character event. So what I'm trying to do is to kind of cover all of the bases, so to speak, in the progression of a turn for the shadow player. And so I've kind of modified some of these to account for if an action isn't available to offer a secondary action that could be used within that same priority. And I've also created a chart where, in case you want a more systematic method of prioritizing the action dies, we can kind of use this to prioritize the actions that the shadow player would select. And then this would basically be broken down to number 1 priority is protecting your victory point locations, 2, conquering enemy victory point locations, 3, actions and events that burden the fellowship, 4, actions that add a die to your pool, whether they be the addition of an action, minion, or faction die. And then the destruction of enemy forces. We want to prioritize the use of event cards whenever possible, as those are a finite commodity. If we end up going over our hand limit, those cards have to be discarded and they can't be used. So the shadow player wants to place a priority on using his event cards. And then in case we're using the Lords of the Ring expansion, I've got some tables that will randomize whether Gandalf the Grey is going to be the Keeper of Narya or the Grey Wanderer, and then also the alternate companions, whether they will use their original form or their alternate form, and whether they're going to begin inside the Fellowship or they will begin in their alternate starting locations. Now I'll go through some of the player aids that I've created. Most of these were created just for me to film my upcoming playthrough using the solitaire rules. So I'll show you what I have. First player aid is a battle board, and this is primarily for myself in filming my playthroughs. Basically it has an attacking side and a defending side. We can place the forces on the board and it can be moved, so that's kind of a handy thing for myself. I also made a spot on the defender side if there are any defensive positions. As an example, if it was a city, that'll be a reminder for myself that the attacker hits on a 6 during the first round. Same thing with a fortification. Attacker hits on a 6 during the first round. And if it's a stronghold, attacker hits on a 6 during each round, or none, and there is no defensive benefit. I've also created a set of army markers, and basically these are going to be more useful for me during playthroughs because they're standing up now. My other ones I used like square cubes, I think. But this will be a little bit better, I think, for the playthroughs. The viewers will be able to see whether if there's an army in the location. It'll be a little bit more prevalent on film to see where those armies are located. And finally, I've created a deck of cards. Now this is experimental, and I'll tell you why I did this. The deck of cards contains 20 cards, just as the same as the results on the tables. So I basically transferred the tables to cards. And the reason I've done this is cards offer one very big advantage that dice cannot do. And that's basically a memory. When a dice is rolled, obviously, it doesn't know from Adam what it rolled the time before. But as cards are taken out of the deck, it increases the probability of other actions and decreases the probability of actions that have already been selected. So these cards can be used for the in-game purposes. If we need to determine Sauron's gaze, we flip the card. It's military matters. If we need to do a hunt for the ring roll, we would just draw a card, and it would be the number of dice that we'll place in the hunt box. Finally, the same thing for the focus location. That will tell us if we need to draw a location where Sauron's focus is, draw a card, and then that would determine where his focus is located. Like I said, the advantage of this is that this has a memory where dice don't. So this would allow us to fulfill the probabilities that are in the table without so much randomness being placed into it. So I'm going to experiment with this and see if this might be a superior way than making the dice rolls. We'll have to see. But this is just something that, like I said, this is experimental at this point. I'm going to be doing a playthrough of War of the Ring using the solitaire rules, and we'll be using the updated charts, and we'll see how that plays out. But this is something that I'm kind of working on the side, and I'll see if maybe this might be a better distribution for the probabilities than the dice rolls. And that's going to bring this video pretty much to a close. I just basically wanted to give an introduction to my upcoming playthrough of the game and showing the changes that I've made to the system. I think these changes will be an improvement, but we'll find out. I've done some playtesting, but probably not enough. So we'll see how this works out in a real game situation. And we must remember that this system is created as a quick method to facilitate solitaire play. You know, we could create huge flowcharts of if and then and yes and no statements, and that could be much more effective in controlling the shadow player. But you know, you get in, I've tried some games like, as an example, Labyrinth, The War on Terror 2001. They've got this, there's a way to play it solitaire, and it's this very elaborate flowchart, and it kind of just takes away from the spirit of the game. And so when I've created this system, it was with the intent of just a quick die roll and some priorities on a chart to kind of control the opponent, in this case the shadow player. So that was the purpose of this. This has many holes in it because of the randomness that the dice rolls or the card draws would place upon the shadow player. But I think it works, put it this way, it works well enough for myself. I don't have to play two sides completely. I can focus on the free peoples, and the shadow player pretty much kind of plays itself with just going through a dice roll and a few tables. So that was kind of the premise of the creation of this. So anyway, we'll do a playthrough of this in the near future, and we'll test out how the new system is working, and if we have to, we'll make additional changes, but I don't think there's much more that I can do with this. I will be posting these files finally on BGG. I've kind of delayed doing that because I wasn't really happy with the system altogether, and I didn't want to put out something that was, you know, half-baked. So I'll release this in a Word format. This way, if the users choose to want to change something, they can easily make edits to it. And I'll also include the PowerPoint files that I use to create the battle board and the army markers and the cards. So thanks for watching, and I would like to invite you back to the channel. We will be doing a playthrough of War of the Ring in the next week or so, and I look forward to seeing you then. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and I hope everyone has a nice evening. Have a good night.